Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the warm reception. So let's see here. All right, so on my notes here, it says I'm supposed to tell an icebreaker joke. So I tried my stand-up comedy routine on my 16-year-old daughter, and she said absolutely not. What happened to Chris Rock would not even pale is what if I tried my jokes. So what she did say, what was incredibly funny is the heavily photoshopped picture of me to make me look younger, how my head is too small for a helmet, and how my belly is wrestling with my vest and losing. So I don't know that I can do comedy, but she said I look funny, so that would be the way to start. And we went through what I've done. Who cares? The transportation network in Texas, rail has been talked about here all day, and it is very important to the transportation system of Texas. And I thought it was interesting to some of the statistics that there was 10,500 miles of track. There's 3 Class 1 railroads that operate in Texas. There's 55 short lines, and I guess if you ask different people, that number changes a little bit. 4 passenger or commuter rail services, that includes Amtrak. We have 10,000 road crossings and 5,426 bridges. So obviously we are very important to the freight network of Texas. So what does the rail division do? And that's actually what I'm going to try to educate everybody on what the rail division within TxDOT is. We actually have 3 sections. One's a planning programming section, a rail highway section, and the rail safety section. The planning and programming section manages all the state-owned assets when it comes to rail. We happen to own a railroad. We, by legislation, cannot operate it, so our partners at Texas Pacifico operate that rail line for us. It's about 400 miles, and we have an international crossing in Presidio, Texas, that we're working on trying to get back. That bridge, some of you know, is burned down, I think, twice. It has been rebuilt. It's steel, no longer wood. And we're trying to restore service back over the crossing to Mexico. The planning and programming section also, well, I went too far. Don't look at that yet. They also are focused on our state rail plan. They manage all our consultants when it comes to planning and programming. There's several things that we can do within the state with our consultants. And when it comes to planning and future identification of what we can do with rail, and specifically the state rail plan, which is mandated by legislation on what we're going to do with passenger rail and freight rail within the state. This was when I was high railing out on the railroad that we own. As you can see, there's vast land out there, and that we want to try to help Texas Pacifico in doing what they can to grow that rail business. But while we're there was a protest of actually export of beef. So after a short period of time, I was able to negotiate. Our way around Mama Cow here, and I did promise that I would only eat Chick-fil-A going forward. So once we came to that understanding, we were able to move on. So our rail highway section really focuses on our highway grade crossings. Like I said, there's 10,000 of them in the state. We have Section 130 money it's federal money that we use to enhance the safety of rail crossings. So this is kind of a heat map of the next 5 years, a $100 million plan of investment that we would like to make into some of these locations. We have consultants out there now identifying what our top crossings are that need Section 130 money. We're asking the short lines and the Class 1 railroads to help us identify those crossings. And then we will take, again, some Section 130 money and invest into that. And that's upgrading crossings from old halogen lights to LEDs. That's replanking, preemption with signals, anything to do to enhance the safety of crossings. So again, as I was saying, we will take those crossings that we're looking at, and we'll make priority rankings of those. We do send staff out to do diagnostics along with the municipalities or counties and the railroads to identify what the crossings need, and then we will do designs and sign agreements with the railroads to fund the construction of crossings. We also have a rail safety section. So many people don't know, we have 17 rail investigators for the state of Texas, and they work in conjunction with the FRA inspectors. So they have the same power and authority as an FRA inspector to go out and ensure compliance with federal regulations of railroads. And where appropriate, take exceptions, and if absolutely necessary, write violations. However, I would like to think that most of the purpose of them is to ensure that the safety of the railroads and, where possible, educate to help better understanding of the federal regulations. So this is a track crew that's out there looking at the gauge of a railroad. Next. We also have several, we have most of all of the practices. So there's operating practices, MP&E, hazmat, and track, and we also have a signal division. So those inspectors inspect those areas and, again, ensure compliance with not only short lines but with the Class I railroads. We also look at industries that interchange on the general railroad system. And this is just an inspector looking in the signal box doing a grade crossing inspection. All right, so when I was talking about planning and programming, some of the big things that we do are statewide initiatives. Obviously, the Texas Rail Plan is the biggest thing that we do when we talk about planning. We've also done the Houston-Beaumont Regional Freight Study, and we've looked at the Metroplex Freight Mobility Study. So there's some of the bigger things that we've done. I believe these are on our website if you need some casual reading. So the rail traffic control model. So this is actually a diagram of the Dallas Metroplex. So we do real-time modeling. We take information from the railroads and we put it into our algorithms to determine what future traffic could look like and how we can improve rail traffic and lessen congestion. So this is just kind of a snapshot of some of the things that we do to get real-time modeling. With that, in the Metroplex area, these are some of the improvements that we're looking at. We know that there's going to be congestion. The population centers moving into Texas are growing. Freight is growing. The railroads have a different model of how they transport goods. They're doing longer trains. So all of this needs to be considered into our modeling to determine what we can do. I'm not interested in looking into studies that really don't produce anything. So some studies are, states are good at studying things just to study, or it comes back, it's $20 trillion, going to take 100 years to do. That's not something we're really interested in doing. We really want to focus into what the problem areas are and produce valuable documents that can be used by the railroads or for planning districts to determine what they can do to improve the rail network within the state. So as we advance some of those studies, we already know we have some pinch points that we need to address. We've looked at Tower 55, and there's some enhancements that were made, both for the BN and the UP, and those enhancements were obviously provided a lot of benefit, but there's a phase 2 to that, and we are looking to move that forward. Anybody that's been to Houston has been stopped by a train, I'm sure, and has maybe spent the night waiting for the train to go by. So there's a myriad of reasons of why that happens, but at the end of the day, we want to be part of the solution on what we can do to fix that. Is that grade separation? Is that different operating plans? Whatever it may be, that we want to work with our Class I partners and our short lines over there to determine what we can do. And one thing that we can do is fund some of the studies with our consultants to determine a better way to operate. So we're going to look at the east end of Houston where the public concerns are. And then obviously there's lots of talk about passenger rail options. Where appropriate, TxDOT will engage in a study. I have met with the president and CEO of Amtrak, and I have committed, again, where appropriate, that we will do joint studies with them, especially on the existing operations within Texas where we can improve or enhance current operations. This, and I've already talked about this, but we are really looking hard at our grade crossings where we have signal preemption. So we are integrating the grade crossing signals and the traffic signals. So the idea is you don't get a green light to go when the train is coming. So we spend quite a bit of Section 130 money, and we will continue to do that. We'll continue to put efforts into that for preemption in order to mitigate any fatalities at grade crossings. All right, so we have had, again, I've only been here 4 months. In my 4 months, I've evaluated kind of where the rail division is, and I've asked for a priority shift in some areas that we have. One of those is in the short line railroads. You heard Paul up here today talking about what short lines do. We at Rail Division recognize the importance of them, what they do to serve the rural communities and their interchanges with the Class 1 railroads, first and last mile. So we are dedicating some internal efforts for the funding that we have internally to assist the short lines where we can. And in the future, we will continue to evaluate where appropriate, and we have funding for that we will continue to fund short line projects that we can. And obviously, we will always continue to support the Class 1 railroads with our consultants in doing studies and with our grade crossing efforts. We also are going to expand what we do with the ports. We have a maritime division within TxDOT, and it's important that rail and maritime come together and try to identify what we can do with congestion and environmental impacts to, especially in the Houston area. So we are going to start working in collaboration with them between rail and maritime within TxDOT. And then anything that has an economic development tool that has a rail component to it, that is something we want to look at and see how we can, improve the economy of Texas. I believe that the FRA's talked about this, and I'm not smart enough to add any more than Allison has. So there's lots of money. We know that. TxDOT is internally determining what we're going to do, how we should spend this money, and how we should go after it. So I guess there's really not much more to add to that. One big thing that we want to look at with the IIJ money is grade separation. So there is a lot of money out there. We have a current study going on right now to identify some of the crossings. I don't want to say the most dangerous. Any fatality at a crossing becomes a dangerous crossing, right? So we want to identify those crossings that need attention, and hopefully there's some money for us in Texas to potentially look at some grade separation. So we want to have a list of those already identified, and when the NOFO comes out, and again, if appropriate, the TxDOT applies for those funds, we would do so. And I don't want to bore you with a bunch of slides. I figure there might be a bunch of questions, maybe, hopefully not. But if there are, I'll be happy to take those. And my email is Jeffrey. There's another guy named Jeff Davis. He's this poor guy that gets all my emails out of the Atlanta district, and he's a surveyor, and he knows more about rail now than he probably cares to. So if you email me, it's Jeffrey. I would like to thank all the women and men that work on my staff. They do a great job, and they don't get a lot of credit, and I want to recognize them. I think there's Stephen is over there. Jess, I don't know if she's here. And Chad. Chad is the section director for planning and programming. And thank you for putting this slide presentation together. And I just want to recognize my folks. So thank you.